Hello everybody, welcome to EVS 36. I hope you're all learning a lot and enjoying yourselves at the event, as we always do when we come to these events. Today I'm joined by Jim Riley from General Motors. He's one of our great customers. Jim, would you like to take a moment, tell us a little about yourself and what you do at General Motors?
Sure. So, as John had mentioned, I'm Jim Riley. I work at GM. GM's primarily an American automaker. Some of our primary brands are Chevy, Cadillac, GMC, and Buick. Our CEO, Mary Barra, has a number of initiatives to drive towards having zero crashes, zero congestion, and zero emissions. We're trying to revolutionize the transportation industry for every customer, and we're doing that through a number of different ways through our brands of Hydrotech, BrightDrop, and GM Energy. I'm here representing GM Energy, one person in the organization. My role is Advanced Technology Manager. GM Energy has a similar mission to the overall GM corporation. It's focused around every home, every business, and every community. We're doing that through three different pathways: Ultium Home, Ultium Commercial, and Ultium Charge 360. We're bringing a number of products to the market to try to help increase the electrification of transportation and energy.
Part of the reason I'm talking to you, Jim, is I'm head of the commercial division for Schneider Electric EV infrastructure, part of the prosumer team now. Been with the company a little while myself, and we know each other pretty well. We've talked quite a few times on the phone. So tell me, as we move forward into this space, it's kind of an interesting discussion that everybody's been having. A lot of people focus on the chargers. A lot of people are now starting to recognize that infrastructure is a bit of a challenge. Why do you think people need to move forward quickly in the fleet space and start the process today?
Well, it kind of depends on what is their real focus, right? So are they focusing on what is their personal reason for starting the journey, or why do we think they should really jump into this journey? A lot of customers might be focused on it for sustainability reasons or try to just move towards that net zero future, but also they're trying to integrate with renewable energy, optimize cost savings, energy efficiency opportunities. But really, the automakers are doing a large push to try to drive towards electric vehicles being the next generation for transportation, and we're trying to be pretty heavily involved in that. Why would I recommend that we start this your EV transformation as soon as possible? There's the interconnection queues, which we're learning are pretty massive hurdles for a lot of our customers, and if you don't get into some of those queues, some of the folks from Netherlands earlier were just saying that they may end up having to the interconnection queues might be causing some issues where you may get put into a longer timeline, or you might not be able to interconnect new EV chargers. There's also infrastructure and hardware lead times, but also just to get some of those learnings as early as possible so that you can be an early adopter and really learn what are the challenges and get out there ahead of some of the other competition.
So you've touched on this a little bit. What are some of the major challenges you're seeing? Infrastructure is obviously a challenge. What are some of the things that are causing a little bit of difficulty with the transition to this new environment?
Yeah, so charging is definitely the number one challenge that a lot of our customers are running into. Whether it's when you get into operation and you're starting to charge the vehicle, there's demand charges that the utilities have set up to try to manage congestion on the system. Some of the other challenges, like I had mentioned, there's just general infrastructure upgrades, the cost of those upgrades. That's definitely one of the hurdles that our customers are running into. And we're looking to help bring solutions to try to solve some of those challenges by partnering with folks like Schneider. So,
where would you suggest they start? I mean, if somebody's looking to build out their infrastructure, where do they need to go? What are some of the first steps?
Collaboration, I think, is the number one thing that you really need to focus on. So build out the right team. Who are your existing suppliers and partners? Try to make sure that they actually have the experience that you're looking for in the electric vehicle space. They have experience working in the energy industry. Definitely diving into that space. But yeah, make sure you have the right team around you, right? That's how we get solutions, is by partnering all together.
So getting in a little bit more detail from that aspect, if you were going to go to it from a step-by-step process, getting into probably starting with scope, what would some of the recommendations you would make?
So I think every organization and every expert in this auditorium right now probably has their own process for how they would pursue interconnection and sort of this energy transformation. I've often been, and we have multiple processes within GM. We're leaning on those of our partners and those relationships. I lean on one that I had the opportunity to work with some folks at the National Renewable Energy Lab on a microgrid design process, and we had sort of a 5-step process built out there. I'll reference this. So there's 5 steps. It's scoping and planning, which is sort of, again, building out that team. What are your performance requirements and expectations? And then some of those risks and threats. Then you get into the next step is data collection. You have a good understanding on what are your requirements. Now what are you trying to achieve? What's your baseline? So establish your existing site conditions, including like electrical and your load analysis. What existing generation do you have? Energy resources, including fuel and renewable energy resource availability, and then a historic reliability to establish sort of a baseline. What does your future look like? Then you dive into really getting a conceptual design. Everyone always wants to start there, right? A conceptual design, but you need to get that firm understanding. What do you want to do, and what is your current existing conditions to move towards that? Then you dive into actual project development, making sure you have the contract mechanisms in place, get your financing. Have you communicated and worked with the electric utility to really understand, like, what are the constraints on your system? What are the opportunities that your current conditions might bring? And then the next stage is really getting into that implementation. So diving into design, construction, commissioning, and then operations and maintenance. In my experience, operations and maintenance, you can't just take any of these energy assets, put them out in the field, and then leave them. There needs to be a constant O&M tail to make sure that you have the funding and someone's keeping eyes on these assets to make sure that you're keeping them online. EV charging infrastructure, there's definitely a lot of those concerns. So,
Yeah, I agree with you. Some of the service-related aspects of the job, once it's done and complete and you have the infrastructure in place, is probably one of the more overlooked challenges in the space as a whole. When you're working with different companies, I know I've gone to meetings with you and there's literally been teams of organizations and members of the industry that are interested in stepping into this space and helping grow out the environment. What do you look for from a value standpoint when you're looking at partners?
So yeah, it's hard to dive into the specifics on that, but just getting an understanding of who are your current partners, right? If you currently have a facility management company or someone that's managing your fleet for you, do they have the skill set to also transition into the energy industry as well? So finding that balance, it's no longer just filling up your vehicle with gas or diesel. It's also you're managing an overall like facility and energy management system. So one thing that we're trying to do at GM is help to streamline that. And there was a recent announcement by our GM Fleets team, the transition to the GM Involve organization. And what we're looking to do with that is to help streamline that, right? It's from the moment you come to GM and say, hey, we want to buy an electric vehicle, you can then start getting into the conversation. The GM Energy team gets pulled in. We have relationships set up with companies like Schneider Electric and many other sort of fleet turnkey providers that we're helping to bring EV charging solutions, energy management services, other sort of services along that lines. But really what we're looking to do is sort of simplify those contracts, make it so you have the least number of contracts, all of the hardware works well together, all the software is well integrated. So provide for sort of that end-to-end experience from the moment you buy the car until in that O&M tail that I am.
That makes really good sense. One of the conversations that we've been having a lot over the last year is about bi-directional charging. We've looked at it at a residential level. What are some of the really kind of cool features about bi-directional that General Motors is excited about?
I'll speak more to myself just so that I'm not representing what General Motors is specifically excited about on the bi-directional side. But no, I'll do an overview quick too, just so everybody's on the level playing field. Bi-directional charging is that lyric, for example, you charge that vehicle at a certain rate and also discharge that vehicle at a certain rate. There's a number of reasons why bi-directional charging has benefits. The electric utilities are setting up utilities and rate structures that really enable and incentivize you to charge your car when is a real ideal time and also discharge your car when there's an ideal time. We see at GM, we see utilities as like one of our number one partners. A lot of my new teammates on the GM Energy team actually came from a number of electric utilities. So those incentives and those structures that they're setting up are really going to help us enable this in the future. We sort of break out bi-directional charging into 2 or 3 different buckets. And there's also sort of that smart charging aspect. A lot of folks know V1G, so the ability to start charging when is really ideal based on time of use rates or a demand response signal, those sort of things from your utility. So that's sort of the V1G side. That's just unidirectional charging. When is the best time? Then you get into V2G and V2H, so vehicle to grid and vehicle to home. And vehicle to grid, the definition that we're trying to lean behind, along with a lot of the industry, is when the vehicle and an inverter is operating connected to the grid and the vehicle is charging, essentially when prices are low on the grid, and discharging power when prices are high. So I always like to use like a stock market analogy. Vehicle to home is using that same exact functionality of being able to charge and discharge the vehicle through the charge port, but doing it when your home's disconnected from the grid. So you're either doing that for backup power on the system, or you might be doing it in the future for some sort of demand response scenario. I know there's a number of microgrids out there that they're fully disconnecting from the electric grid at the request of a demand response signal from the utility. So, yeah, and then vehicle to building is sort of the last one. It's that similar sort of, instead of a residential example for the vehicle discharging power into a single home, it might be discharging power into the electric, into a building. Maybe that building is in a microgrid, or it's just a fleet depot, and the vehicle is looking to offset the load of the building or complement existing generation in a microgrid.
It's a pretty interesting, exciting time that we're headed into with the vehicles. I mean, the lyric is right here. This thing is amazing. It is a really cool car. The industry as a whole is really exciting, and it's starting to move a lot more quickly. There's been some recent announcements in the industry. There's been a lot of different things that are happening. We are now getting to a point where we can see the horizon for a maturity state on some of what we're doing and how we're doing it. I want to thank everybody in the audience for joining us. I want to thank you, Jim, for joining me today. I appreciate it. Looking forward to catching up again soon. And thank you for your time here. I really appreciate you spending a little time with me.
Got it. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks, everybody.